Hi, welcome to class. So today what I'd like to do is move on to the next set of notes that I'm going to go through. And as you can see here, that's Lecture 3, Table Management. Now this is pretty similar to what we did last class. The last topic we looked at was table creation, where we use the create table command, we specify what columns we want, and then we specify what constraints we want. And the way that we did this in the last video was that we basically had created a script, and we would run that script, and it would first drop the table, and then it would recreate that same table. So that was sort of how we could practice making a few changes to a table. We could create it, and then we could maybe modify our script, add a few more columns, or maybe add an extra constraint. And then we would run the script again and it would recreate the table. But of course, we can only do this when we're first setting up a database. Once the database is live and has data in it, you can't if you want to make a change, you certainly do not want to drop the tables and then recreate them, okay? That's going to obviously cause a lot of problems. So the lecture notes that we have today, it's going to show us how to modify the tables. And so this is a good lesson to do because it builds off of what we did last time. There really aren't any new concepts. The modifications that we do in table management is just to basically add or remove columns. We can modify the data type of the column, and we can add and remove constraints. We can disable constraints, and those are pretty much the operations I'm going to show you guys today. Now, before I do that, though, I would like to go back and review, in terms of table creation, the foreign key constraint, because it's a very important constraint. And last class, I kind of just went boom, 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 right, all the way through the constraints. This one, I'd like to just go back and do a quick example. So I've got my SQL developer fired up here. And I've connected to the EX user right here. So you can see all of the tables for the EX user. And I basically followed from the book in pages 315 and 317. They show the creation of a vendors table and an invoices table. So actually I named this in INV. I'm gonna fix that. Let's see here. Let me just cut this and I will drop table INV. Did that not work? Let's see here. Okay, looks good. So that table's now been dropped, and that way I can add in the correct name invoices. Okay, so let's run this. All right, there we go. And I'll just refresh the tables. Okay, so I can see my two tables, invoices and vendors. All right, so I've created these tables, and this is a good place where we can just quickly review some of the concepts from last class. So I'm using the create table command, and I'm specifying all of the columns. So in vendors, I have vendor ID, and that is of type number. Then I specify a column constraint because I'm doing that in line with the column. The other way to do it is to do a table level constraint. And I'm naming my constraint vendors PK. That's important to do because if you don't name your constraint, Oracle will give you a default name that won't be very meaningful. And then if an error comes up, someone's going to have to go look up that constraint name. And then the type of constraint in this case is a primary key. The other constraint I have, the other column is vendor name, and this is a varchar, so variable text. So it's only going to store as much as I actually enter. It's not going to pad it with spaces. And I'm setting a maximum of 50 characters for the vendor name. And I have two constraints. I have a not null and I have a unique constraint. So all of these are column level constraints. Now when it comes to the invoices table, we have three columns invoice ID, which is number, and I'm specifying a not null constraint here, but I'm not giving it a name. I have a vendor ID, which is a number, and once again, I'm also giving it a not null constraint, but I'm not naming that constraint. I have invoice number, and that is going to be varchar, and it's got a maximum size of 50. It has a not null and a unique constraint. And then when I come down to the bottom, I'm specifying some table level constraints. So I have a constraint invoices PK, which is the primary key constraint, and the column is invoice ID, so that's my primary key. And then here's the key one, and this is what will help us when we're going to go through the foreign key stuff. We have a constraint here, invoices foreign key vendors, which means that vendor ID, the column for vendor ID, references the vendors table and the vendor ID column in that table. So what that's saying is that if we have an invoice and we enter it, there needs to be a matching vendor ID in the vendors table. So let's do an example here. I'm going to open up, create a new database file. And I'm going to, once again, I'll copy the connection. So I'm connecting to the EX user. And let's say I was to insert some values into my invoices table. So the values I'm going to insert is 1 for my invoice ID, 1 for my vendor ID, and I'll put 1 for my invoice number. So 1, 1, and then this is a varchar type, so I have to use quotations. Okay, so let's run this and see if it'll work. All right, and of course it doesn't, because there isn't actually a vendor ID with the name, with the ID 1 in the vendor table. So when I try to insert into invoices, the foreign key constraint prevents it from allowing this. So it says right here, integrity constraint, and it names my constraint, invoices underscore FK underscore vendors violated, parent key not found. So that's a nice descriptive error message for me. Okay, so to get around that, there's a few things we can do. The simplest one, let's try this. Let's just add, let's insert into vendors. I'm going to insert a vendor ID, and I'm going to insert a vendor name. So let's try that out. Okay, so now this should work, because when it goes to add the invoices, there will be the matching primary key in the vendors table that the foreign key in the invoices table references. So let's run this. And there we go, it worked that time. It inserted the value. All right. Okay, so we've added into vendors a row, and we've added into invoices a row, and we know that invoices has a foreign key which references vendors. So let's comment these out, because we don't want to insert them again. And now I'm going to go delete from vendors, where vendor ID equals 1. So we know that our vendors table, the primary key is vendor ID, and in invoices, we have the issue that we have a foreign key which references the vendor ID. So this should not work because of that foreign key relationship. So let's try that out. And there we go. We get the error message. It says, error report, integrity constraint, invoices, FK vendors violated, child record found. So in other words, it's not going to let us do that. Okay, so in order to allow us to be able to perform this action where we're going to delete an entry that has a foreign key relationship, what we need to do is modify our foreign key to say on delete cascade. So what that means is that if the primary key it references gets deleted, then this row as well will be deleted with it. So I now need to modify these tables. So I can rerun this script. I'm going to drop both tables, and then I'm going to, I should be able to go and try deleting from the vendors table, the vendor ID of 1, which is referenced in the invoices table. So let's try this. Okay, so when we go to drop the table, we run into an issue, and that's because we drop the vendors table first, and it contains the primary key referenced in the invoices table. So basically, once again, the foreign key relationship is preventing us from doing this. Now, there's two ways I can fix this. The first one is I can write the keyword Cascade constraints, okay? And what that's going to do is when it deletes the table, it's going to remove any constraints that are associated with that table. So it'll remove the foreign key constraint from the invoices table. So now when I run this, you can see that it runs correctly. Now the other way I could do this though is I could just change the order. So it won't work because I'm deleting vendors first, and vendors has the primary key. But if I delete invoices first, there aren't any relationships in vendors that reference invoices. So it's safe to delete invoices in this case and then delete vendors. So I'll run it this way, and there we go, it works. So you'll notice here I've added my onDelete cascade. So now I can go back and I should be able to delete from vendors where the vendor ID is 1. So let's run this, and this should now work. Okay? So essentially it basically removed from both tables. So if I now go and look at my vendors table, and I want to see the data, okay, there's no data in that one. And then the invoices table, because I deleted from vendors and there was a foreign key, it would have deleted the row in invoices. And if I look at data, there's nothing in it, okay? So let's just do that example one more time. Just to, I'll just insert these back in. Okay, so now when I look at the vendors table, we can see that there's a value, a vendor ID of 1 and a vendor name of 1. And when I look at the invoices table, I can see the same thing. We have an invoice ID, vendor ID, invoice number, all right? Now, I'll comment these again. And I'm only deleting from the vendors table, but because I'm using onDelete cascade in that foreign key, when the vendor ID is deleted, okay, the vendor ID inside the invoices that references it is going to see that deletion and then is going to force itself. That row will then be removed. In other words, to keep referential integrity. Okay, so let's try that. There we go. And once again, if I were to go now and look at the vendors table, there's nothing there. And the invoices table, there's nothing there. Both were deleted. Okay, so that's that. So that's kind of the first thing I wanted to go over today, is to just to do a bit more of an example using the foreign key stuff. You're probably going to run into this when you're editing tables, when you're adding data. You're going to see these violations, and it's important to have a good understanding of well, what's going on. So you can always refer back to this video when you run into a foreign key constraint issue, deleting a table, updating data, deleting data, etc. This is the type of thing that happens quite often. Okay. So table management, that's the current lecture slides that I have for today. And these slides really complement what we learned last time. It just kind of builds off of the idea that we're creating tables that have columns, the columns have names, the columns have data types, and the columns have constraints, or we can specify the constraints at the table level. And basically with this lecture, all we're doing is we're modifying those properties. So if we've already created the table, we have the option. We could drop the table and then recreate it with some different attributes, or we could use different commands to alter the different properties. And this is, obviously you need to know how to do both. And this is the preferred method if the database already has data in it, because otherwise you'd be destroying all that data that's already there if you delete or drop the tables. Okay. So alter table is one command that we'll be looking at, and this allows us to change the table structure without having to start from scratch. So the syntax here is alter table. We give a table name, and then we have to say whether we're adding, modifying, dropping, and then we specify a column. So we can add a column, we can modify a column, we can drop a column. Okay, seems pretty straightforward. And an example here is they are adding a column, so alter table, publisher, add, and they're adding a column named ext, and they're providing the type for that column, which is number, and it has 4 digits is the size of this value. So that's pretty simple. We can try that out in a second here. Okay, so yeah, let's just do an add example then. So I'll go back to my SQL developer, and let's see here. All right, so we've got our vendors. Let's just say, I'm just gonna add one. I'm gonna call it vendor province, okay? So comment this out. And I'm gonna say alter table vendors, add column. It's kind of interesting that they have that syntax with the brackets there. Let me just check that in the book. Okay, so I don't think we need, okay, so I'm gonna say add, and I'm gonna say the column name is province, and the type I'll say is varchar. We'll give it a 15 maximum size, and that should be it. That should work. So let's try this. Okay, so table vendors altered. And I can also use the describe command, so dsc vendors after I've made that change. And there we go. We can now see that we have that third column, vendor ID, vendor name, and then province is type varchar. Okay, and there's no constraints, so that's why we're not seeing anything under the null. If we look back at the other part, we notice that we have vendor ID and vendor name. One's a primary key, the other one has a not null constraint. So that's why it's showing up and saying not null in that column. Okay, let's see here. Okay, well, let's just keep going. I mean, I'd like to, well, let's do another example. Let's do one more. So let's add another one. So alter table vendors, add, and okay, let's try to come up with one. I'm just gonna call it category. Okay, category, varchar 2, I'll give it 20 maximum. And let's see if I can add a constraint with this. So I'll just go, I'm not sure if I can do this or not. I'm just kind of curious. So I'm going to go constraint. I'll name the constraint category NN, and the type of constraint will be not null. Okay, let's try this. Okay, so that works as well. It makes sense, right? You could add a constraint when you add a new column to your table. Okay, so let's move on. So we did the add command, we did an example. So the next one is modify. So the idea, of course, here is we already have a column. We want to modify its properties. And some of the things that we can do here, we can change the size of the column. So in other words, if it's varchar and there's 10 characters, we can modify that to say varchar2 and say it's 5 characters. Or we can say it's 20 character maximum. We can also change the type. We could, within reason, we can change it from a varchar to a char. I don't think we could change it from a varchar to a number. We'd probably get errors if we did that. We can also add a default value for the column. So if there's no default, we can assign a default value for it. Now there are some restrictions of what modifications will work and some will fail. If the number already has numerical, if it's a number type and it already has number data, and let's say you have 4 digits in your number, no matter what, you won't be allowed to shrink that limit. So that'll be restricted. You can obviously increase the number of digits, but you can't decrease it. Any loss of data is prevented when doing a modify. So in addition, if you have character data, let's say you have character data and you have a maximum size of 10 characters, and someone has gone and entered a string already that's 9 characters. So that would mean that the smallest you can reduce it to would be 9. If you try to go 8, you're going to get an error. Okay, so let's do a few examples. You can see here we have the syntax. It's very similar to the add. So alter table books, modify, and it just says varchar 210. Why does it not specify the column? Okay, yeah, I don't know if that would work. I have my doubts. So they're doing the modify, and here you can see they're specifying the column title, and then they're specifying the size. They're modifying the number to give it different precision. So in this case, 5 total digits and 1 digit to the right of the decimal. But this isn't allowed. Because I guess they're decreasing the size of the number and someone's already entered values. Okay. So let's just try a simple example then. Go back to my SQL developer. Okay, so let's go alter table. We'll go vendors, and I'm going to say modify. And the column name, let's just modify one of the ones I already added. So I'm going to say province, and I'm going to change this to varchar 2. Okay, so let's just say I make it 10 instead of 20. And then I'm going to give it a default value as well. And the default will be Ontario. Okay. All right, let's try that. Okay, so it seems like it works. You can see that varchar 2 is 10. And we also gave it a default value. So now if I were to insert, so insert into vendors, values. Okay, so vendor ID, let's go 2, vendor name 2, province. Okay, so we'll just say NL, and category we will go with bicycles. Okay, so let's try that, and it inserted the row. Okay, all right. Okay, so let's keep going. And these examples, one of the things that I guess I recommend is go through, just try out a few of these examples in your SQL developer. Certainly when I'm going through and practicing, it's, reading it's pretty simple concepts, but it's always good to try to take one of the examples and just execute a few of the commands in SQL developer. It's always good practice. Okay, so the next one here, this alter table, we're going to use the drop column command. So this can simply remove a column that we don't want anymore. Now, there's going to be some restrictions when doing something like this. This command can fail, and some of the conditions are listed here. You can't delete the last remaining column in a table. Well, that makes sense. And also, you cannot delete the primary key from a table. Okay, so let's try this one out. Go into my developer. All right, here we go. So alter table vendors, and I'm gonna go drop column, and I'm just gonna specify, I'll just specify province. Okay, and let's see if we can do that. Just clear this. Okay, and we can see there, now there's only 3 columns now. The province one has been dropped. Now, just for completeness, let's try vendor ID. And of course, this should not work. We should get an error because vendor ID is the primary key. And there we go. So an attempt was made to drop a parent key column, drop all constraints referencing the parent key column, or specify cascade constraints in a statement. Okay, so it's essentially giving us some hints about how we would actually go about getting away with that, but we can't drop it as long as it's the primary key. So essentially we could remove the constraint of primary key, and then we could drop it. So we could do 2 commands, and that would allow that to work. All right. Okay, so another example, another command here is alter table, and it's set unused. So this allows you to mark a column for deletion. Once marked for deletion, the column cannot be restored. Storage space is freed at a later time once it is dropped with the dropped unused clause. Okay, so I'm not exactly sure why we have the alter table set unused versus drop column, because they do the same thing, essentially, exactly the same thing. The difference is, what appears, what I'm reading here, is that drop column will reclaim the memory as soon as you perform this operation. Whereas set unused leaves the memory, okay, but basically the column is essentially out of service. You will never get it back, and it won't appear anymore. And the difference then would be memory management. So if you're writing a program that's doing work on a database, and you're going to drop a bunch of tables, that might be a very slow operation and would bog down your database. So perhaps using the set unused command would have some performance benefits. I really should look this up though, because I'm not exact. There's probably some other subtle differences between them. Anyway, let's try this command out. So we'll use this to set unused the category command. So alter table vendors, and we'll go set unused, and the column we will have is going to be category. Oh, and I need to specify the column. Okay, so let's try this. Okay, there we go. So that, that column is now gone completely, and we don't see it in the description. And the only thing that we still have to do to get the memory back, that the memory in the computer is still being occupied by that column. We're just not able to reference it ever again. But we have to issue a drop unused command. Okay, so we would just have to do this command here, alter vendors drop unused columns. So I'll do that as well. Might as well do it while we're here. Okay, so alter table vendors drop unused columns. Okay, so that ran successfully. So basically the memory has been reclaimed and we now have more memory available to use in our database. All right, so next up we have a rename command, really simple. It's just going to rename a table. So we say rename, we give it the current table name, and then we specify 2 and then the new table name. So very, very straightforward right there. I'll let you, I won't even try that out. You guys can go and try that one. Really simple one to execute. And then of course, after you do that, you have to reference using the new table name. And they're just showing that right here, that they then use the new table name. And if they try to use the old one, they get an error. Okay, the truncate command is used for deleting all of the rows. And the space is immediately freed up. Now we are going to look at using the delete command to delete all of the rows from the table as well. But this is another way of doing it. So you would just say truncate table name, and then it's going to remove all of the data from the table. Okay, so that's a simple command. I'm not going to do an example there. So now we're getting into constraint management. So this is where we're going to use the alter table command. And instead of altering or modifying or adding a column, we're now going to be doing operations on the constraints. So adding new constraints, removing them, etc. Okay? All right, so constraints can be added or deleted from a table using the alter table command. So I think that means we cannot modify. Once a constraint has been added, you either have to remove it if you want to make a change. So remove it and then add a new one that's slightly different, essentially. So adding constraints. So we've already seen that we can add constraints in our definition for a column. So I'm not sure what they mean by this, including column definition. I'm guessing what they mean is that we're adding the constraints when we're creating the table. And we can do column level constraints, or we can include them at the end of a column list, which means that we are adding the constraint at the table level. In addition, though, we can also use the add constraint command here. So alter table, we give it a table name, add, then the constraint keyword, the name of the constraint, and then the definition for the constraint. Okay, so alter table, promotion, add constraint, PK, promotion gift, and then we give it the primary key, and we specify the column that contains the primary key. So this is very simple. It's very similar syntax to what we use when we're creating tables to specify constraints. So here's another example where we're using a check constraint. Okay, so let's see here. Now, one thing that I should mention is, so this is a viable way of adding all your constraints. So instead, some people would probably prefer, instead of doing what we've done here, I've gone through and I've added my columns inside the table and the constraints at the same time. Another option though would be to basically, in my script that initializes my database, to go through and create just my tables with just the column names and the data types. And then at the end of my script, after I've created all my tables, then I can go and add my constraints separately one by one. So that's a viable option, and some people probably would prefer that because it makes your table definitions a little bit easier to read because you don't have all these constraints mixed in. Okay, so let's go back, and I'm going to add in my province. And I'm going to add in, oh, that's altering it, sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna add province, and I am also going to add category. Okay. And I don't need to drop the unused. Okay, so there we go. That didn't work. Okay, so it won't allow me, because of the constraint for category, because there's data already in the vendors table. If I want to add a category that has a not null constraint, well, that's not going to work very well. Now, I suppose I could give it a default value. Okay, let's see if that works. Okay, there we go. So the default value now means that if I look in my vendors table, I just have to, oops. How come I'm not seeing, I would have thought I would see bicycle. Okay, I'm gonna close this. Okay, what am I doing here? Okay, there we go. That just took a while, I don't know. I mean, sometimes it just takes a while to refresh. But now we can see that because I set the default value to bicycle, when I added that column, even though it has a not null constraint, it allows me to add it because it's going to provide a default value. Okay, so I got a little sidetracked there. Let's get back to what I was going to do originally. And I was going to try adding a constraint. All right, so I already have a constraint on vendors, okay? So let's try adding a unique constraint might not be a good idea because I have a default value. Okay, let's do a check constraint, okay? So we're gonna just restrict the category to a specific set. So I'm gonna go alter table vendors add constraint CK underscore. Okay, so I'm gonna call this check constraint. Actually, I'll call it category CK, and the type of constraint is check category in Okay, now I'm just gonna look in my book here just to make sure I have the syntax right. Okay, so I just looked this up in the notes we had last time. So for the check constraint, it's you specify a column name and then you say in, and then you have parentheses and then basically the various strings that it can, of allowed values. So I'm gonna use that. Okay, so add constraint category CK. Okay, so check category in, and then I can say bicycle, games, sports. Okay. All right, let's try that out then. Oh, doesn't like that. Oh, I see, I have. Okay, so I had alter table add. Okay, so the only reason I got errors was because I already have those columns. I can't re-add them. I forgot to comment those out. So I'm just gonna comment these out now. Oops. Okay, let's try. Well, the constraint worked though, because the alter table, table vendors was altered. And now there should be a check constraint in for the category. So I can try this now. I can insert into vendors. So we're going to go values 1, vendor name will be 1, province NL, and category I will say movies. Okay, let's try this. Now this shouldn't work. I'm just going to comment this as well. Okay, so obviously it didn't work. The category check constraint was violated. So let's change this to be sports. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, so we inserted the row that time. Perfect. All right. Okay, so we've done our example now where we have added a constraint. So alter table, add constraint. We did a check constraint, but any of the different constraint types are valid. So they're showing some examples here, adding a primary key constraint. There's another primary key constraint. Now this one is a composite key. So the primary key contains 2 columns, order number and item number in that case. This one's adding a foreign key constraint. And obviously with the foreign key, you have a little bit more typing to do because you also have to specify the table and the column where the primary key exists that you're referencing with your foreign key. Okay, so another option we have too is that you can add a constraint and you do have the option of adding on delete cascade. So this comes back to what I showed you earlier on. This just means that when you add the foreign key, should you add the on delete cascade or not? It's a little bit dangerous to add this because that means that your data can be deleted much more easily. But in some situations, you want to be able to delete data and not have a bunch of errors. So having a constraint that says on delete cascade sometimes is necessary. Okay, so this is a situation where they're adding a foreign key and it references a column in the same table. So it could be, in this case, customers referred foreign key and it's in the customers table and it refers to the customer number. Okay, unique constraint. Okay, and then they're adding a check constraint. In this case, these are 2 date values. So the order date has to be less than or equal to the shipping date. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. So they're adding that constraint there. Order items, a check constraint to make sure the quantity is greater than 0. And then they're adding a not null constraint. Now, for some reason, the not null constraint uses a different syntax. So I do not know why that is, but if you want to add a not null constraint, you can't go add constraint. You have to go modify. So you would say modify, then you'd say the column, which is the same as, I guess not in this case. So modify, you specify the column, then you say constraint, then you specify the constraint name, and then you say not null. So that syntax is quite a bit different actually than the add constraint syntax. It just happens to be that not null uses this. I do not know why that is, but that is the syntax you have to use. Okay, so I've gone through quite a bit today. I'm gonna stop here, and next class, I guess Thursday, I'm gonna continue on finishing up these notes. We'll do a few more examples, and then if there's more time, we can move on to the next topic. Okay. Hopefully, you guys are making progress with the first assignment due Friday. If you have any issues, please reach out to me through email. Or through D2L, and I'll try to help you out with that. Okay, well that's it, and have a great rest of the day.